I stood there in my grandfather's stately living room, surrounded by family members who had barely spoken to me in a decade. The lawyer's voice seemed to echo as he read my name, followed by a number that made the room go silent. $6 million. I watched my father's face change from smug certainty to shock, my mother's hand flying to her mouth. 10 years earlier, they had pushed me out with nothing but a suitcase and harsh words. Now they couldn't look me in the eye, as Grandpa's final wish restored everything they had taken away. Before I tell you how my life changed forever, let me know where you're watching from. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and give this video a thumbs up if you've ever felt abandoned by the people who should have been there for you. Growing up in our family meant growing up with expectations. My father, William, ran a successful financial firm in Boston. He was the kind of man who measured love in achievements and disappointments in percentage points. Every report card was scrutinized, every extracurricular activity evaluated for its potential to impress college admission boards. He wore crisp suits even on weekends and spoke about the market at dinner as if it were a family member. My mother, Eleanor, was not much different. As a renowned interior designer, she treated our family the same way. She treated her clients' homes. Everything had to be perfectly arranged, presentable, and impressive. She hosted dinner parties where I was expected to be charming and intelligent, but never too opinionated. Our house in the affluent suburbs of Boston looked like it belonged in a magazine spread because it often was. Then there was my younger sister, Sophia. She was the golden child, the one who effortlessly met every expectation. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect extracurriculars. She played violin, spoke French, and won science competitions. My parents beamed with pride at every recital and award ceremony. And then there was me. Bedford the disappointment, the square peg they desperately tried to hammer into a round hole. I was not unintelligent, but my mind wandered during math lessons while I sketched the way light fell through the classroom windows. I was not unambitious, but my ambitions lay in capturing moments through a camera lens rather than capturing market shares. Our home was beautiful but cold. We had everything money could buy, but dinner conversations revolved around achievements and appearances rather than feelings or dreams. My room was spacious and well-furnished, but I felt suffocated by expectations that seemed to seep through the walls. The only place I felt truly seen was at my grandfather Harold's farm. Grandpa was my father's father and the founder of the family business, but he could not have been more different from his son. Where my father saw value in status and wealth, Grandpa saw value in character and passion. Every summer, I would spend 2 weeks at his sprawling property in rural Massachusetts. Those days were filled with early morning walks through dewy fields, helping to feed the horses he kept out of love, rather than prestige, and long conversations on the porch as the sun set. Unlike at home, questions at Grandpa's farm were never tests but genuine expressions of interest. "Show me what you see through that camera of yours, Bedford," he would say, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he examined my latest photos. While my father dismissed photography as a hobby that would never pay the bills, Grandpa saw it as my way of communicating with the world. "You have an eye for truth, boy," he told me once, looking at a black and white photo I had taken of one of his farmhands. Some people go their whole lives without finding their way of speaking to the world. You have already found yours. Those words sustained me during the school years when my father would look at my B's and C's with thinly veiled disappointment, asking why I could not be more like my sister. As I entered my teenage years, the gap between who I was and who my parents wanted me to be grew wider. By 16, the arguments had become routine. My father would lecture me about responsibility and future prospects. I would try to explain my passion for photography. He would dismiss it. I would retreat to my room. Sometimes I would call Grandpa, who would listen quietly before offering gentle wisdom that never felt like judgment. "Your father fears what he does not understand," Grandpa explained. He built his life on certainties, numbers, profits, measurable success. Art is uncertain. It requires faith in something you cannot quantify. That scares him more than he would ever admit. As high school graduation approached, the tension reached a breaking point. My father had mapped out my future business school, followed by a position at his firm, leading eventually to taking over the family business alongside my sister, who was already being groomed for her role, despite being 2 years younger. I had different plans. I had applied in secret to several art schools using money I had earned from small photography jobs. When an acceptance letter came from a respected art program with a partial scholarship, I finally gathered the courage to tell my parents at dinner one night. "I am not going to Wharton," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have been accepted to the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. I start in the fall." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother set down her fork with deliberate slowness. My sister stared at her plate. And my father, his face darkened with a rage I had seen directed at failed business associates, but never at family. "If you choose this path," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you choose it alone. We will not support a wasted life chasing childish dreams, not with our money, not with our name." William, my mother, interjected, but her protest was weak and quickly abandoned. "I mean it, Eleanor," he continued, eyes never leaving mine. "If he walks away from everything we have built for him, he walks away from everything." That night, I called Grandpa. His advice surprised me. "Sometimes, Bedford, the bravest thing you can do is disappoint the people you love in order to be true to yourself. I cannot tell you what to choose, but I can tell you that a life built on someone else's dreams will always feel borrowed, never owned." 2 weeks later, on the night of my graduation, the choice was made. After a ceremony where my accomplishments were overshadowed by my sister's early acceptance to Princeton, my father handed me an envelope. "Your graduation present," he said coldly. "A deposit for your dorm room at Wharton." I handed it back. "I am not going." What followed was the worst fight we had ever had. Words were said that could not be unsaid. My father called me ungrateful, selfish, deluded. I called him controlling and blind. My mother cried, but stood by my father. My sister watched in silence from the staircase. "If you leave this house for that art school," my father finally declared, "do not expect to come back. Not for money, not for help, not for anything." That night I packed a single suitcase with clothes, my camera equipment, and the small amount of savings I had. As dawn broke, I left the house where I had grown up, walked past the luxury cars in the driveway, and did not look back. The first apartment I could afford was in a run-down building in one of Boston's less desirable neighborhoods. It was a studio with peeling paint, temperamental plumbing, and neighbors who fought loudly at all hours. The rent consumed nearly all of my savings within months. I found work wherever I could, morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening hours stocking shelves at a grocery store, weekend gigs assisting wedding photographers who paid me barely enough to cover my bus fare. Between jobs, I attended classes, learning to refine my eye and develop my own style. That first winter was the hardest. The heating in my apartment worked sporadically, and there were nights I slept in layers of clothing huddled under every blanket I owned. I rationed food carefully, learning that hunger feels different when you know it comes from choice rather than circumstance. I tried calling home a few times during those early months. My mother answered once, her voice tight with emotion. She asked if I was eating, if I was safe. Before I could ask if I could come visit, my father's voice boomed in the background, and she quickly hung up. After that, my calls went straight to voicemail, then eventually to a disconnected number. The only family connection that remained was Grandpa. We met every few weeks at a small cafe, halfway between his farm and my apartment. He never offered money directly, he knew my pride would not allow it, but he found other ways to help. Books about photography would appear in my mailbox. A warm winter coat was something he no longer needed. A contact who might be interested in hiring a photographer for a small project. "Your father is stubborn," Grandpa told me during one of our meetings. "He comes by it honestly." I was the same way at his age. But time has a way of softening even the hardest hearts. "Keep moving forward, Bedford. One day they will see what I see in you." During our meetings, I showed him my developing portfolio. Unlike my early work, which had focused on beautiful landscapes and carefully composed still lifes, the kind of pretty pictures that sell these new photos captured the raw reality of my changed circumstances. The tired eyes of my fellow minimum wage workers. The contrast between the wealth of Boston's financial district and the struggle in its shadows. The unexpected moments of beauty and humanity in places my parents would never venture. "You are finding your voice," Grandpa said, studying one image of an elderly woman feeding pigeons outside my building, her weathered hands gentle despite the harshness of her surroundings. "There is truth here, and truth is always valuable, even when it is uncomfortable." By my third year, on my own things began to stabilize. I had secured a position as an assistant to James Harlow, a commercial photographer who specialized in architectural shots. The pay was still modest, but it was steady, and I was learning the business side of photography that my formal education had glossed over. James recognized my eye for composition and began sending me on smaller jobs he did not have time for. Corporate headshots, product photography for local businesses, the occasional engagement photo session. Each assignment built my confidence and my portfolio. All the while, I continued my personal projects. I befriended the homeless people in my neighborhood, learning their names and stories. With their permission, I began documenting their lives, not as objects of pity, but as individuals with dignity and complexity. This project, born from my own experience of insecurity, would later become my first serious exhibition. Grandpa was my biggest supporter, though he had to be discreet about it. He told me that my father had forbidden any mention of my name in family gatherings. My sister, now thriving at Princeton, occasionally sent secret text messages from new numbers, but they grew less frequent as she became more immersed in my parents' world. "They renovated your room," she texted once. "It is Dad's home office now." The message stung more than I wanted to admit. Through it all, Grandpa remained my anchor. He attended every small show where my work appeared, standing proudly among strangers who had no idea that the elderly gentleman in the corner was related to the artist. He purchased several of my prints for investment purposes. He insisted with a wink, though I knew they were unlikely to appreciate in value anytime soon. During one of our cafe meetings, I noticed Grandpa looked tired, older somehow. When I asked if he was feeling well, he brushed off my concern. "Just the calendar catching up with me," he said. "Nothing to worry about." But there was something in his eyes that made me worry anyway. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just as I was preparing to leave for a shoot. It was from Teresa, Grandpa's housekeeper for the past 20 years, and one of the few connections to my family that remained intact. "Your grandfather is in the hospital." "Bedford," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It does not look good. He is asking for you." I canceled the shoot, consequences to my reputation be damned, and rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital. My hands shook as I parked my beat-up car between luxury vehicles I recognized as belonging to my parents. The hospital corridor seemed endless as I made my way to the room number Teresa had given me. Outside the door, I hesitated, knowing who would be inside. 5 years had passed since I had seen my parents, 5 years of building a life they had never witnessed. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The scene inside was exactly as I had feared. My father stood by the window, his hair now streaked with gray, but his posture still rigid with authority. My mother sat beside the bed, her perfectly manicured hand resting near Grandpa's, but not quite touching it. My sister, now a poised young woman, rather than the teenager I remembered, stood in the corner, her expression unreadable. And there in the center, diminished against white hospital sheets, but still unmistakably himself, was Grandpa. His eyes, cloudy with medication, found mine, and a smile transformed his tired face. "Bedford," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "right on time as always." My father turned sharply at my name, his expression hardening as he saw me. "This is a family matter," he said coldly. "You made your choice years ago." Before I could respond, Grandpa's monitor beeped a warning. A nurse rushed in, checking his vitals and adjusting his oxygen. "Please," she said firmly, "no upsetting the patient. If you cannot keep things calm, you will have to leave." My father looked like he wanted to argue, but instead retreated to the far corner of the room. My mother would not meet my eyes. Only my sister gave me a small, sad smile of acknowledgement. I moved to Grandpa's bedside, taking his hand gently in mine. His skin felt paper-thin, the bones beneath prominent. "I knew you would come," he said softly, so only I could hear. "I have been keeping track of you, you know. The exhibition at the Whitman Gallery, the award for the Homeless series. I am so proud of you, Bedford." Tears stung my eyes. "How did you know about all that?" He gave a weak chuckle. "Just because some people choose not to see does not mean everyone is blind." We talked quietly for a few minutes, his breath growing more labored with each passing moment. The doctor came in, checked his charts, and gave us all a look that needed no interpretation. Time was short. "Would you all give me a moment alone with Bedford?" Grandpa asked, surprising everyone in the room. My father started to protest, but my mother, showing unexpected firmness, took his arm. "William, please." With obvious reluctance, they left the room, my sister trailing behind after squeezing my shoulder briefly. Once we were alone, Grandpa's expression became serious. "Listen carefully, Bedford. I do not have much time." He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "I have made arrangements. You will understand soon enough. Just remember what I have always told you about living truthfully." "Grandpa, I do not understand," I said, fear gripping my heart. "You will," he promised. "Just know that I have always seen you, even when others refused to look." Before I could ask more, the monitor alarm sounded again, more urgently this time. Medical staff rushed in, and I was pushed to the hallway, where my family waited in tense silence. The doctor emerged 15 minutes later, his face grave. "I am sorry. We did everything we could." In that moment, the divide between me and my family felt vast yet paper-thin. We were united in grief, but separated by years of hurt and misunderstanding. My father turned away, shoulders shaking silently. My mother collapsed into a nearby chair. My sister wept openly. And I stood apart, mourning not only my grandfather, but also the family I had lost long before this day. In the days that followed, I was excluded from the funeral arrangements. The obituary made no mention of me, as if Harold Bennett had only one grandchild. The funeral itself was a formal affair at the same church where I had been christened, confirmed, and expected to eventually marry. I attended anyway, standing at the back, ignored by most of the mourners, except for a few curious glances and whispers. My father saw me, but made no acknowledgement. My mother's eyes flickered toward me once, quickly looking away when our gazes met. Only my sister broke ranks, approaching me briefly to whisper, "He talked about you all the time, you know, when they were not around." That small act of kindness was the only warmth I felt that day, as I watched them bury the one person who had truly accepted me for who I was. Life continued in his absence, though the world felt dimmer somehow. My career was gaining momentum. The homeless project, titled Invisible, had attracted attention from serious critics and led to commissioned work from socially conscious publications. I had moved to a better apartment, could afford proper equipment, no longer had to choose between electricity and dinner. By objective standards, I was succeeding. Yet each milestone felt hollow without Grandpa to share it with. I had built a surrogate family of sorts, fellow artists, friends from the neighborhood, mentors like James, who had taken a chance on me. But on holidays, birthdays, or when something remarkable happened, the absence of blood family left a void that could not quite be filled. 6 months after Grandpa's death, an unexpected call came. The voice on the line was formal, professional. "Mr. Bedford Bennett, this is Martin Whitaker from Whitaker and Associates. I was your grandfather's attorney. There is a matter regarding his estate that requires your presence." "There must be a mistake," I said, confused. "I was not included in the family affairs." "There is no mistake, Mr. Bennett," the lawyer replied. "Your grandfather left explicit instructions. The reading of certain portions of his will was delayed by his specific request. Your presence is not optional if those instructions are to be carried out." He provided a date, time, and address. Despite my misgivings, curiosity, and a sense of final connection to Grandpa compelled me to agree. The law office was located in one of Boston's oldest buildings, all polished wood and brass fixtures. As the receptionist led me to a conference room, anxiety tightened my chest. Would my family be there? What could Grandpa possibly have left for me that would require this formality? The door opened to reveal exactly what I had feared. My father, mother, and sister sat on one side of a large table. Their expressions as I entered ranged from surprise to discomfort to, in my father's case, barely contained annoyance. "Thank you all for coming," Martin Whitaker said, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room. "As you know, Harold Bennett left specific instructions that certain provisions of his will were to be addressed 6 months after his passing. Today marks that occasion." He opened a leather portfolio and adjusted his glasses. "Before I proceed, I should note that what I am about to read reflects the legally binding wishes of Harold Bennett and cannot be contested under the terms he established." My father shifted impatiently. "Get on with it, Martin. We all have commitments today." The lawyer nodded and began to read. "I, Harold James Bennett, being of sound mind, hereby make the following amendments to my previously executed will. Having observed the conduct and character of my heirs in both prosperity and adversity, I have come to certain conclusions regarding the stewardship of my estate." He turned a page. "To my son William Bennett, I leave my collection of first edition books and personal papers with the hope that he might find in them the wisdom that eluded him in our conversations." My father's jaw tightened. "To my daughter-in-law Eleanor Bennett, I leave my late wife's jewelry collection with the reminder that true beauty, like my Catherine possessed, always comes from within." My mother looked down at her hands. "To my granddaughter Sophia Bennett, I leave my summer property in Cape Cod and the sum of $1 million to be held in trust until she reaches the age of 30 or demonstrates financial independence from her parents, whichever comes first." My sister's eyes widened. "And to my grandson, Bedford Bennett," the lawyer continued, his voice unchanging despite the weight of what followed, "I leave the controlling interest in Bennett Financial Group previously promised to my son, along with all associated voting rights. Additionally, I bequeath to him the sum of $6 million to be transferred immediately and without restriction." The room went completely silent. My father's face drained of color. My mother gasped audibly. My sister looked between us all, shock evident in her expression. "This is absurd," my father finally sputtered. "There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," the lawyer said firmly. "Mr. Bennett was extremely clear about his wishes. He also left a letter for Bedford to be read privately. He handed me a sealed envelope, my name, written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it. 'My dear Bedford,' I read silently. 'If you are reading this, then I have gone on to whatever adventure awaits us next. Do not grieve too long. I lived a good life. You may be wondering about my decision regarding the family business and your inheritance. Let me explain. When I built this company from nothing, I did so with the belief that its purpose was not merely to generate wealth, but to create value and opportunity. Your father lost sight of this. He came to worship the bottom line above all else. including the most precious asset any man can have, his family. You, Bedford, despite having every material advantage stripped away, have demonstrated the qualities I value most: integrity, perseverance, compassion, the courage to live truthfully, even at great personal cost. The money is yours to use as you see fit. My only guidance is this: do not use it to avenge old hurts. Use it to build the life you have already proven you deserve. As for the company, you may keep it or sell your shares. That choice is yours. But I suspect you already understand what your father never could, that true wealth has little to do with bank balances. I have always been proud of you, even when others refuse to be. Live well, Bedford. That will be my best memorial. With all my love, Grandpa. I looked up from the letter to find my family staring at me, a mixture of emotions playing across their faces. My father seemed caught between anger and disbelief. My mother looked almost fearful, as if expecting retribution. Only my sister showed something like relief, perhaps even a hint of satisfaction. The lawyer cleared his throat. There are documents to sign, of course, but the provisions take effect immediately. After the formal business was concluded, we all stood awkwardly in the conference room. Years of separation hung between us like an invisible wall. Finally, my father spoke. "Your grandfather had no right," he began, his voice tight. "That company was promised to me. It was understood." "William," my mother said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "Not now." To my surprise, he stopped, looking suddenly older and very tired. Without another word, he turned to leave. My mother hesitated, then stepped toward me. "Bedford," she said, her voice uncertain, "would you perhaps consider having dinner sometime to talk?" The request was so unexpected, so small compared to the magnitude of what had just happened, that I found myself nodding before I could consider all the complicated feelings involved. "I would like that," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. As they left, my sister stayed behind. "He visited your shows, you know," she said, once we were alone. "Dad, he would go when he thought no one would recognize him. He never said anything about it, but I found the exhibition programs in his desk." This revelation stunned me more than the inheritance. "Why are you telling me this?" She shrugged. "Because maybe it is time for all of us to see each other clearly." Grandpa seemed to think so anyway. In the months that followed, rebuilding relationships proved both harder and easier than I expected. The first dinner with my parents was strained conversation, halting, and superficial, but it was a start. My father struggled the most. Years of certainty about his place in the world had been upended not just by the inheritance, but by the implicit judgment in Grandpa's decision. Yet beneath his pride, I occasionally glimpsed the father I remembered from early childhood before expectations had built walls between us. "I was wrong," he admitted during our third dinner together, the words clearly difficult for him. "Not about everything," he added quickly, "but about some things, important things. For my part, I had decisions to make about the company and the money." After much consideration, I proposed a compromise. I would maintain ownership, but appoint my father as CEO with certain conditions focused on ethical investment and employee welfare. The arrangement allowed him to save face while acknowledging that his expertise in finance far exceeded my own. I used a portion of my inheritance to establish the Harold Bennett Arts Foundation, providing grants and mentorship to young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation's first exhibition featured works from inner-city youth alongside pieces from my Invisible series, creating a powerful dialogue about visibility and opportunity. My mother attended the opening night, her presence, a public acknowledgement of reconnection. She moved tentatively through the gallery, studying each photograph with an attention she had never given my early work. I never really looked before she admitted, stopping before an image of an elderly homeless man whose dignified expression belied his circumstances. "I was so focused on what I thought your life should be that I never saw what it actually was becoming." Healing came in small moments. A family dinner without argument. A birthday card, my parents attending a gallery opening. The fabric of family torn apart years ago was being rewoven thread by thread. The pattern would never be the same as before, but perhaps it could become something new, something stronger for having been broken and mended. My latest exhibition, titled Reconciliation, explores this journey. It features paired images, past and present absence, and presence estrangement and connection. The centerpiece is a portrait of my grandfather's empty chair at the farm, juxtaposed with a new image, the same chair now occupied by my father, his expression thoughtful rather than stern, for once. As I looked around the crowded gallery on opening night, I saw my mother deep in conversation with James, my old mentor, discussing lighting techniques with unexpected enthusiasm. My sister stood by my most recent work, proudly explaining the composition to her friends. And my father, still uncomfortable in artistic settings, but making an effort, nodded along as one of my photographer friends excitedly discussed business opportunities for visual artists. Grandpa was right. True wealth has little to do with bank balances. It lies in the courage to live authentically and in the connections we forge through honesty and forgiveness. The inheritance that matters most was not the money or the company, but his example of seeing people for who they truly are, rather than who we wish them to be. Has my family fully healed? No. Some wounds leave scars that never completely fade. Do we still sometimes fall into old patterns of expectation and disappointment? Yes. But now there is something new. Alongside the old hurts, a willingness to try again, to see differently, to value connection over correctness. And in that space, something like grace has begun to grow. What about you? Has an unexpected event ever changed your family dynamics? Has anyone in your life stood by you when others walked away? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family forgiveness and finding your own path. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is the courage to be yourself. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember that it is never too late for a new beginning.